Hello, hello. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Untethering Shame podcast. I'm your host, Kyira Wackett, and in this episode, we're exploring the intricate world of codependency and its connection to shame. Codependency is so much more than just an unhealthy relationship dynamic. It's a profound psychological condition that intertwines a person's self-worth and identity with the needs and behaviors of others. This often stems from and reinforces feelings of shame, as individuals in codependent relationships may struggle with their own needs and boundaries, feelings that their worth is contingent upon their ability to care for or fix someone else. By addressing these patterns, we're not just talking about personal struggles. We're discussing a fundamental aspect of human psychology that affects countless lives. Joining us today is a very special guest, Jessica Parente, an expert who has navigated the turbulent waters of codependency, both personally and professionally. Jessica is an ANCC certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She's also an ICF accredited somatic trauma-informed coach and a level 4 brain spotting provider. She's not only a best-selling author, but also the founder of It Ends With You, where she focuses on helping others identify and heal from subconscious and codependent patterns. Her chapter, Lather, Rinse, Repeat, Until You Don't, featured in Caroline Strawson's book, The Unseen Wounds of Women, details her own struggles with codependency and is definitely something worth reading to dive deeper into her story and how she became so wise on this topic. I'm so excited to share this powerful conversation with Jess. We're going to dive deep into the understanding of the roots of codependency, its effect on our lives, and how breaking free from these patterns can help us reclaim our sense of self and reduce the burden of shame. Look, whether you think you're codependent, someone else is codependent, you started doing that thing that we've seen on social media where suddenly everyone's codependent and narcissistic, what we know is that our patterns and behaviors of engaging in the world are always something that we can explore and learn from. Because if we're not careful and we're not mining for some of those maladaptive or unhealthy ways of seeking connection, validation, support within ourselves and from other people, we can develop these really unhealthy behavior patterns. And it's important that we learn how and when to break them with grace, compassion, and a commitment to the process. All right, let's get comfortable, get rid of any distractions, kind of set yourself up so you can really engage with this episode, and let's dive in. Jess, welcome to the show.
Oh, I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Kyira.
Of course. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. I feel like we were talking offline before we hit record that our biggest issue is going to be making sure that we don't talk for 12 hours because, we don't have 12 hours in our schedules. Also, probably lose a lot of people in that 12-hour episode. And so before we just jump in completely into the topic, I love to start every episode doing just a one-word check-in. So if you could describe how you're feeling today, right now, any sort of timestamp you want using one word, what would that be?
I'm feeling really excited. Like you said, I've also been looking forward to this interview since the last time we checked in, which was maybe a month ago, and have been honestly counting down the days since.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing when you meet somebody who not only do we have similar veins of work that we do and how we help people, but also somebody that you just kind of vibe with. So it's really exciting when you're like, no, I really just am looking forward to having a good conversation. I trust that the content is coming with it because we both know our shit, but also just if at the end of the day, I get the chance to talk to a good person, it just feels good. It's a very fulfilling feeling overall.
Absolutely. When you find people that are functioning on that same wavelength, it's so nice.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. So I'm interested because I feel like codependency is a word that similar to mindfulness and meditation, maybe 5-10 years ago kind of had this happen. We've seen it with all these other layers sort of in the wellness field. These terms kind of they're sort of used ubiquitously. Like everybody's hearing the term, everybody's using the term. I joked one day my mother-in-law was reading some book and she was learning about self-care and healing. And then she came out of it basically going, well, that's a codependent person. That's a codependent person. This is a narcissist. This is codependency. This is this. And so I feel like we heard the term. we know it's an important thing we need to talk about. There's also some misconceptions about what it is, both I think in using the term a little bit too broadly, but also some kind of over detailing it to assume it's just romantic relationships. It's just these things. So I thought before we go into everything, could you just paint a picture for us of what codependency is and why we need to care about this topic?
I'm so glad that this is the way that we're starting the episode. And I have a million thoughts running through my mind, and I'm a classic verbal vomiter. So I'm going to try to just start from the beginning and then go through maybe a little bit of my journey, how I have defined it, how the definitions have changed, and really how I see it now. So I always think it's important to understand the history of where the term codependency came from, which was way back in the 60s and 70s. It started in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings where psychologists and therapists and people who were working with the alcoholics started to notice that the disease just wasn't with the alcoholic. It was with their wives, their children, their mother, their dads, their friends, people that we might classically look at or label as enablers, right? But they started to notice these patterns from each of these groups of people that were very similar, and they labeled them codependent patterns. So how my journey with codependency started was in a very classic sense. I had someone in my life, a parent who struggled with substance abuse. And as a child, I took on that responsibility to care for that parent. I wanted to fix that parent. I wanted to make that parent better, right? Because there was something about fixing them and saving them and rescuing them from themselves that gave me my purpose and my sense of worth and my sense of self-esteem and my sense of self-love. If I was doing for others and I was helping them help themselves, then I was important. So that's a very classic picture, which is still an applicable term for codependency, right? This, if you struggle with, or if anyone in your life struggles with substance use, any form of addiction, doesn't matter what that addiction is, or if you're with somebody who, a lot of the times now we're hearing it with people who are involved with a partner that has narcissistic traits or narcissism. And so I think it's important to understand that origin of the word, right, of the word codependency. As I went through my, healing process, the first time I heard the word codependency was when I was 25. My therapist had literally thrown the book Codependent No More at me and was like, girl, you're trying to get involved in your mom and your stepdad's relationship. You're trying to fix and save everyone around you. You're trying to change your boyfriend so that you can feel better. Like, read this book. And then I read that book and I was like, fuck, who am I underneath all of this stuff? It was just earth shattering to me that a book could be written that literally outlined my everyday behaviors and how I felt about myself. So that's where I started my codependency journey at 25. I'm 38 now. So I started reading those books. I started creating better boundaries. I started learning about the habits, breaking those habits, right? But all the while, there was something that was underlying the connective tissue to it all, to all of my patterns that wasn't truly being healed. And how that started to change how I saw my codependency. So some definitions that ring more true to me is either getting my self-worth or my self-esteem or how I feel about myself from external things. I don't care if that external thing is the relationship. Is it usually, like a high percentage of the time? Yes. When people talk about codependency, they also equate it to love addicts, which is and is not always true. Mine was, I need to have straight A's growing up. So I had some perfectionism. Mine was also, I need to fix other people's relationships so that I can feel okay about what's going on. I was fixing, rescuing, and saving everything. But also there were things outside of just relationships that I was using to fill that self-worth bucket. My straight A's in school. I was a competitive dancer. So that perfectionism in the ballet class, that was perfect for me. It was like a duck swimming in water because I could constantly correct myself and I was getting positive regard. It could be being a good friend, the most loyal friend ever, even if the relationship is complete shit and they treat you like garbage. So people will use their jobs People will use being a parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
If my child needs to be happy for me to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
When you start spilling out your self-worth into things that are outside of you, not just I wake up in the morning and even if it's a complete shit day or it's my absolute best day, I am still a worthy, lovable, likable, important human being. When you start dumping that out into the external things, that's when the codependency can start to apply and creep in.
I love that you broke it down that way. I think one, recognizing how many people have heard the term, again, that sort of very traditional approach in the enabling piece. I wrote down as you were talking the love addiction element, because you still hear this with people talk, even with people that are in recovery and maybe they have a partner, a family member who struggles with addiction. They talk about love addiction and how they're basically this trying to heal and all of these elements. I think that's so important, but you boiled it down to something that is so pivotal, which is essentially when you are deriving your self-worth from something that's not you as a person. And that is
Yep.
quite literally like one sliver away from what shame is. And so what you can see, shame is the fear of not belonging, the fear of not being worthy. And so you're kind of ripe with codependency as soon as you feel shame in a way that you aren't managing. It's consuming you, it's driving the bus. How could you not develop a codependent relationship because you're trying to make those fears go away? If you don't have that sense of security, I belong, I matter, which, we could break it down for you when you were younger. You probably didn't feel that way. You weren't getting the security that you needed, that you probably had a lot of intermittent reinforcement. So codependency feels like it's kind of the next step for many people that have unhealed, unresolved, or maybe kind of growing shame that's lurking inside of them that they haven't healed.
Yes. So how I see it is shame is the burden that we carry. It's
Mm-hmm.
however you want to describe that feeling in your body. It could be boulders in the backpack that you're, walking around with, or the rocks in your purse. Or for me, it felt like a weighted blanket just that was constantly over me, right? Because it wasn't necessarily that anyone had ever said to me, you're not important or
Right.
you're not good enough. But those feelings, right? Those inner child wounds or exile wounds. And I know that you're familiar with internal family systems as well, but those exile wounds and inner child wounds of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I don't matter, whatever those are for you, that becomes the driving force of your nervous system to let you never feel that way again.
Mm-hmm.
So then we get codependent or our protector parts, right? These survival mechanisms to keep us away from feeling that way. So every time I got an A, I got positive regard from my teachers that I wasn't getting at home. And I was like, hell yeah, like
Yep.
I can do something right. I am important. I do matter. And that becomes the driving force. And like I said, this connective tissue under everything that you do in your life, because codependency is truly our addiction. It is a subconscious compulsive drive to reach a sense of homeostasis, just like people who are addicted to drugs,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol, sex, porn, whatever it is. It allows them to feel your body is constantly wanting to feel calm, at peace, and at a
Mm-hmm.
homeostatic state. That's what our codependent habits and our codependent protector parts do for us. When I'm feeling dysregulated, if someone gives me positive regard, whether that's they answer a text message, then that dysregulation in my body goes away. That wound is then filled, right? It's filled with that external need and not at all because I'm giving that to my wounded younger self.
Mm. I mean, so I just went in like 4 directions. So I'll try to make it so that we go in one. But one of the things that really stood out to me is I had a person email me a couple weeks ago talking about how they were struggling, basically borderline suicidal. I mean, at least some passive suicidality, because they cannot cope with retirement. And I think about that as an
Mm-hmm.
example. When we
Oh,
think about retirement as being one of the hardest transitions for so many people, particularly generations ahead of us, their worth and value was around what they did. And so then you take that away, they've got nothing left. Similarly, I think about opposite. I had an interaction with my mom. I've talked about this before on the show.
where I came home, I was in kindergarten. I was so excited because when my teacher gave me my report card, she was like glowing, telling like basically like you did amazing. So
Mhm.
I came home, I couldn't really read it. I didn't really know what it all said, but I was like, she's proud of me. So I can't wait to show my mom. And it was just me
Mhm.
and my mom. And I run in the door and she was peeing in her bathroom. And I didn't even like, I blew the door open. Like I
Mhm.
couldn't even wait till she was done peeing. And I was
Mhm.
like, look at this. And my mom immediately got upset. Now, I'm sure that there's some element of false memory that it feels bigger than it was. It might have just been sort of a sigh of disappointment, but it feels like basically a volcano erupted and she was just like so disappointed.
Right, but what's your body telling you?
Exactly. My body is holding this moment. It's still one of those key moments as a kid where she was disappointed in me. Turns out she figured out a little later in the day, she didn't read the legend that said that I had C's
Mhm.
all over on my report card. And apparently a C stood for commendable. Now, again, at however old you are, 5, I didn't fucking know what commendable was either, but she did. And she didn't read it. And so the messaging to me was people will not be proud of me if I am average. And that carried into
Yes.
I have to have the A. Even in my grad school program, my supervisor, gosh, she was amazing. I didn't do it. She tried so hard to get me to not turn in an assignment for her class so that I would get just an A minus, an AB, a B for the class. She's like, I want you to break yourself out of this. Like, you do not have to, your worth is not dependent on being the smartest person in the room. And I couldn't do it. I could not at that time. I honestly don't know if I could now. I think it's one of my deepest codependent relationships is that my worth and value comes from people thinking that I am intelligent and from the idea that I am capable. And so those two tracks of somebody losing their identity when they retire and then me basically building my identity around this and sometimes then pursuing things that I didn't like doing for many years because I was good at them. And that to me was more important than what I wanted to do. So I'll pause because again, I feel like I have 8 more tracks, but those are the 2 things that I feel like are like people hearing this could probably resonate with. Like, wait a minute, that's codependency too?
Yes, honey. Like, so I will just validate that as a psych nurse practitioner in my day job, what I call my day job, I have more men that come to me out of retirement thinking there is something wrong with them than I
Mhm.
care to even admit, right?
Mhm.
Because they don't know who they are outside of that job, right? But I want to
Mm.
backtrack and just try something out with that moment that is still stuck in you from your childhood.
Mhm.
Your mom didn't tell you that you weren't important,
Right.
but how do you think that your daughter, if you put yourself in your daughter's shoes, how do you think she would feel in that moment? And see what comes up in your body because your body has the answers.
Like if she were
And
there and I
right,
did
and
to
even your
her.
body language, right?
Mhm.
Yes, and your body language even right now,
Mhm.
that's where these things are stuck. Because right when we're little, our frontal lobe is not developed. That doesn't happen until when like we're like fucking 25.
Right.
So we have all these years of naturally interpreting other people's behaviors, their reactions,
Right.
their problems, their whatever as a reflection of us.
Right.
Your daughter's doing it right now. That's
Right.
just where she's at in her mental and emotional development. So everything that we do, we think is our fault. We don't have this. As you're looking back, you're having this cognitive, well, my mom was in the middle of peeing. She
Right.
didn't read, right? We give all these cognitive, retrospective
Yeah.
explanations for the event. But
Right.
what is stuck is the feeling. It's not the thought, it's the
Right.
feeling. And that's where it gets back to the body.
Yeah.
Codependency, that's where that compulsion comes from because we have to go
Mm.
back to the body. When you say you don't know that you could ever let yourself happen, I would love to brain spot you because that's how you release that stuff. That's how I've been able to get where I am today.
Yeah, because you are like I think similarly right now is the first time I am really breaking the bonds of the codependent relationship with my mom. There's been a lot of icky, like a lot of layers of work. And so I'm in this, I think probably there's a level of emotion that came up with the fact that I finally set a boundary and cut. I said the thing that I've been waiting to say for 26 years. And then she just never responded.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my husband, I said, when I tell her this, I want you to be prepared. We will probably never hear from her again because she does not have the capacity or the
Yeah.
willingness to do the work. And I'm going to put it in her face. And I have been skirting around it to take care of her feelings for too long. And I'm recognizing I can't. So I think part of my emotion came up with when you said, how would your daughter feel right now? Some of what I've been sitting with is the pain of realizing I don't want to do that thing of like, well, my parent did this, so I'm never going to do that. But I have really witnessed the feeling of rejection in my body from my mom since the time I was little and then till now. It's a rejection to not have somebody show up to a hard conversation. So when you asked that, I felt like I immediately couldn't, like my breath sort of went like an elephant, maybe a small elephant, because I could get a little bit of breath, like sat on my chest. And then I immediately welled up with tears. And all I wanted to do was say, can we pause the podcast? I want to go hug her and make sure she knows she never has to make me feel good for her to feel good. And those were like those immediate urgent thoughts in my brain. And so I think that's the piece is like, I was looking to feel rooted at a time when it's not reasonable to expect that I could do it myself. I was 5. And so not having that sense of grounding, it's now the thing that I try so hard to give to other people. And I think I'm just starting to learn how to do it to me now and healing some of those inner child wounds back then. Like, I don't think I've been able to turn and give that 5-year-old a hug yet at the depth that she needs it to come into my picture.
And that's where everything changes. And that's where things and body-based therapies, because I could sit and we could talk about codependent habits all day, every day, codependent protector parts until we're blue in the face. The real healing is when you get back to the body with things like EMDR, brain spotting, somatic experiencing, any other of the ones that have come out to get you back into that inner child and really release where all of that trauma is not just a thought processing disorder. It is a feeling and a memory processing disorder because all of that gets stuck in your body. That's what Bessler van der Kolk came up with the body keeps score.
Right.
And so we have to incorporate both of those things. So how I really see codependency now, and this will get into kind of like my current definition that I'm still really trying to expand on, is we're starting to understand that narcissism is on a spectrum, right? So there are narcissistic traits, right? And that doesn't always mean a person is a narcissist, but there has to be an other side of that spectrum, right? It can't just be this one exists by itself.
Yeah.
So I really see that the other side of the spectrum is the codependency spectrum. And we all ideally want to be somewhere in the middle, maybe having some codependent traits, maybe some narcissistic traits in a healthy way, not a compulsive way. Because at the end of the day, narcissists and people who would identify with codependency, we are mirror images of each other. We have the same inner child wounds. I am not good enough. I am not worthy. I am not lovable. And that might not be anything that any of our parents, coaches, clergy, whoever was important to you ever said to you, but that is how you felt in moments as you interpreted other people's behaviors around you. So we have the same inner child wounds. Narcissists project outwards. All of their pain, anytime they touch an inner child wound, their pain gets projected outside of them with protector parts like blame shifting, silent treatment, aggressive or abusive language, gaslighting. Whereas codependence, our pain gets turned inward. I am bad. I am not good enough. Then our codependent parts show up, that inner critic that beats the shit out of us. Then we turn into overachievers. Then we're rescuers. Then we're fixers. And it all depends on how far up the spectrum you go. And that's really how I'm starting to redefine it. The more we're understanding about trauma, the more we're understanding about narcissism. Me coming out of my narcissistic relationship a few years ago, that's literally how I'm sitting in front of you right now. I knew I was a codependent. I was in a healthy relationship for 10 years, but it just wasn't the right fit. And I was still doing meetings. I was reading my books. I was breaking my habits, and I still found an abuser. And that was maddening to me. The shame that came along with that, of sitting in this chair, being a psych nurse practitioner, helping other people, men and women, get out of abusive relationships while I am sitting in one, while I know I'm codependent, while I have all the cognition available. And I could not, I'm doing all the meetings all fucking day, every day, and I couldn't get out of it. I could not understand. So codependency with narcissism, I feel, is the most dangerous. It's almost a death sentence unless you figure it out. Because codependency in other ways, with your job or with your partner that's not narcissistic, even with your friends, with your mom, with your own child, there are things that you can backtrack on and correct. But when you are stuck in the cognitive dissonance that is that clusterfuck of narcissism in that relationship, it was like scariest thing. I would have died in that relationship, either by him killing me or me killing myself. And so it was coming out of that really sent me on the healing journey to truly heal my codependency, mind and body. I had to do both. And it was painful. It was painful as fuck.
Yeah. And it's the shame. I mean, I say this all the time. Like I will feel that the people that I'm working with, I mean, we naturally attract the people that we are going to serve. And oftentimes there's an overlap of maybe something we've experienced. Our specialty often connects with things that we've learned and gone through. And so I'll feel that same thing of like, what do you mean? You teach about boundaries. You understand that shame is the root of why we can't maintain boundaries. It's not because somebody needs the 5 steps to set a fucking boundary. Like everybody can block their schedule for lunch and not take meetings. The reason they're taking the meeting isn't because they don't know how to put a block on their calendar. It's because they feel shame. Like I know this, and yet I struggle to do it. And I do think you're right, because when I was pregnant with my daughter, I started seeing a therapist. I'd had an eating disorder years prior. And so I was like, I just think it's probably a good idea to see somebody just in case, you gain weight, your body changes. I continued to see a therapist after my daughter was born because COVID happened 2 weeks later. So I was like, oh, this is probably also a good thing that I should still talk to somebody. And then my grandma, who raised me for many years, got sick. And she was 95. Like it was very clear. I mean, she lived a long life. Her body was just fucking tired. But as I was talking with the therapist and like processing that I was going to have this loss, and my grandma struggled with a lot of interpersonal stuff. I think she kind of swung on when we think about your spectrums. Like she had both sides, the codependency and the narcissism, but she didn't know how to regulate them in healthy ways. So she kind of swung to both sides. And I could see it because it was more overt. But as I'm talking to this therapist, I'm like, I just feel stuck because now I don't know how to navigate this relationship with my mom. And I'm like going on. And she stops me and she goes, well, Kyira, this isn't new to you. And I was like, well, what isn't new to me, please? And she's like, your mom's a narcissist. And I stopped and I was like, no, she is not. And she goes, your mom is the textbook definition of covert narcissism. If I could use somebody to teach about covert narcissism, I would pick your mom. And I was like, huh? Wait, what? What are you talking about? And she's just like going through all these things. She's
Denial
like,
is a beautiful protector part.
Yes. And it was another 2 years 2 years before I even took it and really did anything with it till I did this. Because I was like, nah, what do you mean? She probably has complex PTSD. Right. She's got a hard time. Like she's had a hard life too.
Also be true.
Exactly.
Yes.
But it is the thing that you said of oftentimes codependents will then use all that information to then still make it an us problem. Instead of saying that information can be true and this is still not okay. And so that is, I mean, you had, it sounds like a very different form of narcissism presenting in that relationship. And when it is a romantic partnership and there's all sorts of security components that come in and it feels different. And I think that's the thing where now I can recognize my codependency wanting to come out with my daughter. When I have to set a boundary and I don't feel good
Sure.
and it feels hard and bedtime didn't go as good as I wanted. I want to wake her up in the middle of the night to make sure she's okay so I can feel okay. I don't wake her up. I recognize that that is my codependency. But with my mom,
Right.
I haven't done the work. I haven't gotten to that point yet. And I think what you're saying that's so true, and obviously I need to sit with, is until I heal that, I'm going to be at risk of continuing to develop it in other areas. And I'm likely going to find ways that aren't like with my daughter where I can recognize it and still choose the healthier option, but I'm going to get stuck again until I can break that cycle.
Right.
Hmm.
Exactly. But I could go a million different ways, even with what you said right now. But just a question to ponder for you is when you choose to place that boundary and you don't wake your daughter up, how does that feel in your body?
Well, in the
Well, you
moment,
giggled. Uh-huh.
because in the moment, it feels, it's like the same sort of pressure in my chest, but with a little like that nervous
Yes.
energy, like I want to vomit, because I feel so. I've done enough work. I used to believe that it was because I wanted to make sure she was okay. I have now done enough work to understand I want to make sure she's okay so I can be okay. Like it is about my sense of security.
Yes.
So I've gotten to that place. So I don't do it.
Yep.
But even right now, as we're talking about,
But
I
it's
feel
not
sweaty.
comfortable.
No, it takes usually the rest of the night. Oftentimes sleep will help me reset, but some days I still wake up the next day and I feel hungover from the feeling. Like it feels worse than a hangover.
So your body is in fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
And it's what we're understanding now with polyvagal theory and just the ways that the different ways we're understanding trauma, right? We're redefining all of these words in the way that we understand them. And that's why the body is so important, because in those moments, it's not adult Kyira that is necessarily feeling that way. Adult Kyira knows, I want to let my daughter sleep. This is a good boundary. This is healthy for the two of us. But it's that 5-year-old, that 9-year-old, that 15, 16-year-old that's in there going, no, I need to do this. I need to do this so I feel safe. And that's a lot to digest. But I love that you also brought up this journey with your mom, because my mom, in doing a lot with anger and with resentment and with, just disappointment and grief and the loss of my childhood, that was what really started my healing journey, because what I was doing with my abuser, and we could go do a whole episode on this, was trying to repair the broken attachment that I had with my mother because he reminded me of her. And so much of how we show up in life is driven subconsciously by our inner child wounds and our attachment or lack thereof to our primary attachment figures. So if your mom was narcissistic in nature and could not emotionally attach to you in a way that a child needs, when you think about your attachment with your daughter, it's secure, it's consistent, you're teaching her to be safe in the world, right? This is you breaking generational trauma, which is fucking amazing. That's why my business is called what it is. It ends with you. When you do this work, your little girl will never experience this, because you're breaking 7 generations of trauma by doing this work.
Yeah.
Right. But when we grow up in these environments and we have these wounds and we have these lack of attachments, and this becomes the driving force to literally everything we do. And it is naive of us to think that it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is what I have learned. Nothing from my Western medicine training, because I was literally in amongst all this shit, and we could do a whole other episode on that, right? But this is what I have learned now through understanding my nervous system, where those feelings are trapped and stored, and how to release them. Because there's no amount of talking about it or thinking about it that will allow that to happen. It's 2 different parts of the brain. We can only do talk therapy in parts of the brain that have language.
Yeah.
You only have language in the front part right here.
Yeah.
We have the rest of it The whole middle part, the whole brain stem, how that wraps in your gut. When you just said my stomach is queasy,
Yep.
that's where all this shit is stuck. And that's why we
Yeah.
have to do both. We can talk about it, but you also have to honor the hierarchy that is your nervous system. It's not going to let you go to places that it feels is too dangerous for you. So right now, dealing with things with your mom might come at the perfect time. And it didn't happen 2 years ago because your nervous system was not ready to accept and allow you to dip your toe in that pain. But now you might be
Yeah.
ready to, which is amazing. Your body is always working for you,
Ooh.
always, even if it feels like it's working against you. Your nervous system is always working for you, always. With whatever protector parts and survival mechanisms or habits show up for you, it's always working for you. This includes panic, addiction, eating disorders.
Right. Right. I love that you just said that. It actually took me from the direction that I want. I was like, oh, we should go here. And now I'm like, oh, that's so good. Because one of the things that I think, well, there's two areas that I think people that start to do work on codependency struggle with. One, they've spent their lives detached from their body because their body is a nuisance to them doing things for other people and being a part of the hustle culture. So, it's inconvenient to have to eat.
Yep.
It's inconvenient to have to go to the bathroom. It's inconvenient to sleep. It's inconvenient to need a break. Over time, then it's also, well, your body's
Or to
too
have a
fat.
feeling for us.
Yeah, exactly. The
Yep.
feelings have no place here because they get in the way. And so they have
No,
just
all up here.
severed it. Yes. So they do that. So they're scared to reconnect to their body. The second thing that I think people struggle with, which in many ways I'm sure is attached, is there's absolutely no way to break the codependency cycle, at least from what I understand. So tell me if I'm getting this wrong, without feeling a sense of loneliness, because you're literally rewiring your body to stop doing the things that it's been doing to feel secure. And so people, I feel like those two things stop them. One, being afraid to reconnect to their body. They don't know what to do with the feeling. They're afraid they're going to get stuck there. They don't know what to do if they start listening to their body's hunger and fullness cues. If they sleep, oh my gosh. And so
Right.
that part. And then the second part is, I don't think I can survive the loneliness if I stop doing this. So I'd rather stay in these unhealthy patterns because I'm too afraid that then I won't have anything.
Exactly. And you are so spot on with both of those trains of thought because you're literally, when I started my codependency recovery journey 13 years ago, right, it was a complete deconstruction of my entire way of being, my
Mm,
entire life, how I engaged with others, how I engaged in my job, how I engaged with myself. And that is fucking overwhelming. It is so overwhelming that, right, that our nervous system wants to keep us alive. It don't give a fuck if you're happy. Your
right.
nervous system goes, oh shit, that's way too much. Let's crawl back into the old habits. But I'm here to tell people both things are hard. Living in survival mode the rest of your life and living in these cycles and in these patterns because the universe is going to keep giving you the same shit until you learn the lesson. That's hard. It might be, it's
Mhm.
comfortably uncomfortable right now because it's all that you know. Going on a healing journey and going back in order to go forward is also the hardest fucking work you will ever do. And as I say that, I have a
Mm,
lump in my throat and I could cry because I have done a lot of work with my inner child. She's like my bestie now. My codependent habits, when I did a habit checklist recently, because I held a retreat for women to help start them, like get a jumping off point for healing codependency. The old me checklist, I had like 56 codependent habits. My new checklist, I had maybe 10. And those are habits that I'm aware of that I don't get stuck in. Those are just the ones that keep rearing their ugly head,
mm,
right? Because we are creatures of habit. Our brain is wired, right? It's building pathways. Whatever pathway works for you is the one that it's going to go to. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative for you as long as you survive. So this is
mm.
a complete deconstruction of your whole way of life. And it is hard. But with that, I'm grounded. in things now. I'm present in things now. I can have feelings now without being so fucking afraid of having a feeling. I don't apologize for my feel. That's a habit I'm trying really, really hard to break, is that if I started to tear up and cry on this episode, that I would not say sorry, because that is something that I have noticed across the board. We're constantly apologizing for feeling. Why? Animals have survived for billions of trillions of years based on just feeling alone. They don't have these big thinking brains to get them all fucking caught up. When my cat is scared, she doesn't, even if there's nothing, right? When she's done being in her little freeze response, she doesn't sit there and go, oh my God, you fucking idiot. Like, why were you scared? There's nothing to panic about. She just goes on being a cat. But here we are as human beings, and we get stuck in this. We get so pulled away from being in our body and allowing a feeling to happen that we are conditioned to just be in our brains the whole time. But I heard this line in one of my brain spotting trainings, that we can have one gut feeling about something and then 1,000 thoughts about that feeling, but we are taught to follow and try to sift through the thoughts. Why? You have 1 to 1,000. Why are you not trusting your gut? Animals trust their gut all the time. And here we are, human beings, the most intelligent creatures, that just become little heads on strings, going through our little patterns, waking up and doing our little cycles, having the same shit happen over and over and over again, until you're brave enough to really look at yourself in a harsh way, a little but with grace.
It is. I love that you just called out the fact that there is no easy route. There is making it's, and I think that's the part where we actually can use that front thinking part of realizing both choices suck. We're not, like, you can't mitigate risk and pain. It's just learning to tolerate short-term distress for the long-term gain versus but this isn't that bad because I'm used to it. So you live in basically a state of chronic pain your entire life. It just might not always be physical. And so breaking that cycle, it makes me, I mean, this is just a beautiful way for us to bring it kind of to a close, because I think about even yesterday, I had to have some dental work done, and my nerves, for whatever reason, it takes I need like an elephant-sized tranquilizer. Clearly, I'm on an elephant theme today, but I need like a huge tranquilizer to get my gums.
You want to know what's so serendipitous about that, though?
What?
Is elephants are one of my favorite animals. I have one tattooed behind my ear.
Oh my goodness. I love it. Basically, they were going in to replace a filling that I was really concerned. They were like, it's very close to your root. We don't know if you're going to need a root canal. There's just a lot of uncertainties. My brain was in a very strong fight or flight space yesterday. As they're going through it, I came early because I know it takes longer for the medication to kick in, for me to be numb. But they had numbed me like double, triple what they normally do. And then they go to start and I could feel it and it shot through me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then they had to keep stopping because I could feel little bits of things. And then they got past this filling that they were taking out to replace. And then they were on the tooth and it shot in again. And this thing that was supposed to take about 30 minutes has now taken an hour and a half. And I immediately started crying. And the hygienist was like, you're okay. You're doing great. I was like, I'm not fucking crying about the pain. I'm crying because I feel like I'm letting you down. I feel like I'm a bad patient right now. Like I'm an inconvenient patient. And the dentist goes, what if you were? Like, nobody's mad at you right now. Nobody's thinking. She was like, I'm frustrated that every body is not the same. And so I feel sometimes like I'm supposed to know how to do it. She's like, I have no annoyance towards you. But also, what if I was annoyed? Why is that on you? And I was like, I don't know. And then now I'm sobbing, like, being like, this is not therapy. I'm at the dentist. But I think it's that feeling of what you said of like, my body is always working for me. And in that moment, because I still have some of these unhealed wounds, it's trying to help me feel okay. It's trying to help me manage that. And what would that look like if I chose the other hard, the different route of hard, which I am now on, but still probably resistant to in some ways, and go, gosh, what would it be like if I could go to the dentist and not worry about if I was an A+ patient? Whew, that would be nice. Like, what if I could get to that point?
I will tell you, it's amazing.
I'm so, people listening to this are going to, one, be like, okay, well, we heard Jess say it, so she's got to come back because she already said she could do at least 2 or 3 more episodes on different topics. So I'm just going to say this will be our capper to part 1 because we're going to need to do another one and dive deeper into some of these pieces. People that are listening to this, I think we're going to kind of have 2 routes. So one where their brains, as they're allowing themselves to hear this, I always call it your brain pond, where you want it to just sort of be calm and you don't want to have to see all the things up in there. But when you allow yourself to sometimes receive this kind of information, it's like, I now just mucked everything up off the bottom. And so they're kind of processing all these things that you said, realizing we're only scratching the surface. So some people are going to be like, I just kind of need the next step. What's the next prompt as I'm sitting in this? Some people are going to be like, oh no, I now am seeing what she's saying. I'm ready. I need to do the body work. I've been in talk therapy and this is part of why I might be stuck. So one, could you give the people that are just starting this journey that first prompt? And then 2, for the people that might be more ready, how do they connect with you if it feels like maybe you're that person for them?
So there are tons of resources on codependency, but I think it's always important to just go back to the OG.
Okay.
Codependent No More by Melanie Beattie is on Amazon. That is maybe the codependency Bible that really describes what it is and how I said earlier, maybe that classic depiction of codependency that I very much in my own journey started in. So Codependent No More. And also there are codependency recovery groups, kind of just the same as Al-Anon, the same as AA, but it's on CODA, CODA.org. There they have little quizzes that you can take. You can join, they say to join up to 6 meetings before you decide on one, because everyone's going to have a different vibe. I can't do things that are too structured or too hoity-toity. Like I needed people that were going to cuss and be real.
Yeah.
So really give it an opportunity that if you go to one meeting, and you can do them virtually, if it's not a good fit for you, that's okay. Try 6 or 7 more. Just really start to broaden your horizons. There are podcasts. There's one, the Codependent Millennial, Codependency No More. I have an episode on my girlfriend's podcast where I speak of more in depth about this. And so those are just some really good jumping off points when you're just wanting to scratch the surface. Also, I'm located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My goal is to host a Codependency No More retreat, just starting to scratch the surface on this stuff a couple times a year. We just held our first one. I partner with my girlfriend, Tanya, that I met on a brain spotting training. And coincidentally, it was an international training and both of us were in Pittsburgh. So serendipity is real, people. When you meet people in your life, like it's amazing. So we're on this journey together and trying to host phase 1s and phase 2s of this. But if you're anywhere near the Pittsburgh area or even New York, Ohio, Maryland, wherever, we're going to try to host these a couple times a year. That if you're feeling kind of ready, but not ready to deep dive right now, it's a starter, right? A weekend kind of starter kit to start to look at some of these things. So that would be for people that are a little bit curious about it and maybe just want to explore a bit more, see how it applies to their lives. People who are wanting to reach out to me or to talk to me specifically, I'm always here for it. Wherever you're at in your healing journey is exactly where you're meant to be. I never force anybody to do anything. I am here as a resource. My website is www.itendswithyoullc.com. On there, you can fill out a contact form, which will send a little email to me. And that's how I like to connect to people if they're interested in working with me in a coach-client capacity. Now, I have a personal Instagram, which is way better than my shit-ass business Instagram because I try to have boundaries about how much I'm on my phone. So my personal Instagram my handle is at Jessmo, JESSMO, like LIKE, whoa, WHOA. You will see lots of concerts and cats on there, but this is the more organic version of me if you want to just check me out. Now, my business Instagram that has literally hardly anything on it is at generational.jess. I also have, Facebook pages and personal pages for both of those things. I'm not on TikTok yet. I'm too old for that.
I mean, but what you're really doing is selling us on your business Instagram page. So I'm sure that's the first step everyone's going to go to is that one that you're really
please,
promoting.
Everyone, go look and see my 7 posts, my 7 total posts.
I love it.
Yes, I love it. And this is codependent me trying to have boundaries around, my personal life, a business, and having my day job and everything else. It's a work in progress, as all things come in the time that you are ready for them.
Yes.
So for now, enjoy my cats and concerts.
I think what you just said too, it's such a beautiful way for us to end this idea of things come when you're ready for them. And that is something that sometimes I think people really expect themselves to be further ahead than they are in some sort of work or processing, whether that's like achieving a goal or I should feel better now. Why don't I feel better? I shouldn't be doing these things anymore. And so just recognizing that, you and I have both learned in our own work, both personally and professionally, that never works. Asking yourself to be in a place that you're not in doesn't help you, doesn't serve you. And so I love this. I wrote everything down to make sure that I have it in the show notes for people, because I think all those different entry points, it's that permission to say, you get to decide where you're at. You don't have to be at level 10 or level 2. It's okay to be wherever you are. And that you're giving people the opportunity to build trust with you, that security piece of getting to know you a little bit more personally and what that can look like and feel like for somebody as they make these decisions. So listeners, I'm going to have all this in the show notes. Make sure that you check this out. I also highly recommend coming back to this episode at least one more time when you feel ready, because there are these little nuggets that Jess shared along in there that it's not fair for you to expect you heard them all the first time. I know I'm even going to need to come back and sit with it a few more times before I can receive it fully in my own personal journey. So earmark this, come back, share this with other people, not in a way to do like, you're codependent, but more like, gosh, how fascinating that this is how, exactly. I got one for you and one for you. Oh gosh. I've probably done that to people too before. So I mean, it's all right. We're just trying to help. But this has been amazing, Jess. Thank you so much. Again, listeners, take this in the bits that you are able to. Come back when you're ready for those next steps. We are going to see you back here next Sunday for another amazing episode. And at some point in the future, stay tuned because Jess is coming back. She said it. She's going to be here. So we'll have more coming up in the future.